In today's video, we're going to do some basic questions that I get asked all the time about ice cream making problems and how you can resolve them. So I get asked so many questions on all my videos about why is my ice cream doing this, why is my ice cream doing that, and these are questions generally from people that have adjusted a recipe. They've adjusted a scientifically calculated and balanced ice cream or sorbet recipe, and they wonder why it goes wrong. So we're going to go through how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to go through 10 basic problems and then a few terminology as well. These questions come up all the time, and hopefully they'll help you transform your homemade ice cream or sorbet. So the first question we're going to tackle is, why is my ice cream too hard? When ice cream goes too hard in the freezer, too hard to scoop, too hard to spoon and eat, that is generally down to one of two things. Number one is there's not enough sugar in there, and number two is there's way too much fat. When you make ice cream, there is a specific amount of sugar required to get the texture that you're after. It's the same if you use a sugar substitute as well. So it's a balance of getting the right amount of freezing depression versus your recipe. And this is where terms like pod and pack come in. Pod is the amount of sweetness, pack is how hard it freezes. So if you use a perfectly balanced recipe and you've balanced it so that it is scoopable straight from your freezer, it means the amount of sugar and or sugar substitute is perfect for your recipe and the amount of solids that you have in there. If you start playing with that, let's say you use sugar and you think, actually, I don't want to use that much sugar because to me that's too much. You start taking that sugar out. Let's say you take half your sugar out of your ice cream recipe. You've removed half the solids and you've subtracted half of the freezing point depression ingredient from your ice cream, which means it's going to go much, much harder in your freezer. So you need to understand what the ingredients do and their effect on your ice cream. Question number 2 is, my ice cream is too soft or it won't freeze at all. Again, this actually is exactly the polar opposite to the last question. This is you've got too much sugar and or you've affected the freezing point too much. So if you use something like xylitol, which has a strong effect on the freezing point, erythritol, which is awful in ice cream, that has a really strong effect on the freezing point. If you use too much of these and you cook your recipe and you put it in a freezer for a Ninja Creami and it doesn't freeze, and or you put it in your ice cream machine and it doesn't churn, it's because you've brought the freezing point down so low that your freezer can't freeze it, that your ice cream machine can't freeze it. The walls of an ice cream machine, like a standard home churning machine, get down to about -20, -25, depending on the machine. So you have to really go some to stop it freezing. Your standard freezer at home is somewhere around -17, -18 C. Again, that's actually surprisingly easy to get it below that point. You start adding, you think, okay, I'm going to use a sugar substitute. This recipe calls for 150 grams of table sugar. I'll add 150 grams of erythritol. It won't freeze. It will have a freezing point of about -30. So it won't freeze at all. And you know, when people go on and say, oh, my ice cream didn't freeze, your recipe is rubbish. My first question is, what did you change? Because they changed something. And here we come with the, oh, I didn't want to use sugar, I wanted to use erythritol. You can't make these drastic changes to recipes. It's the same for baking as well. You can't just substitute something for something else and expect it to be the same. You need to understand what they do. Question number 3 is, my ice cream is too icy. Ice crystals form for a couple of reasons. Ice cream itself is a balance of ice crystals, air bubbles, and fat. That's what creates ice cream. With the right size ice crystals, the right amount of air incorporated, and the right amount of fat, you get this perfect texture. When your ice cream is too icy, it means your ice crystals have allowed to increase in size more than we would like. That happens for a few reasons. One is there's not enough sugar to counter that freezing process. Number 2 is the ingredients like to recrystallize after you've made the ice cream. And number 3 is you haven't stabilized any of that free water. So if you make an ice cream and it has 60% water content, that water needs to be stabilized in a couple of ways. One is either you can create a sugar syrup and stabilize the water with the sugar, and that will help reduce the freezing point of your water and slow the ice crystal formation, which will then in turn make the ice crystals smaller. Or you stabilize it with something like guar gum, xanthan gum, tara gum, any of those, locust bean gum, carrageenan, all these stabilizers. What they do is they bond to the water and create a more viscous liquid, which then reduces the ice crystal formation. Another reason that ice crystals form is the amount of time it takes to churn your ice cream. In a traditional machine, if you have like a freezer bowl one where you put it in the freezer for 24 hours and bring it out, they are historically much slower at churning than a high-end compressor machine. The slower the churn, the larger the ice crystals get. So if you were to take my Muso, which is the one I use on the videos here, that will churn in about 12 to 15 minutes depending on the recipe. If you take a freezer bowl version, it might take 20 to 25 minutes. Your ice crystals are going to be larger than they are in mine. There's nothing we can do about that. By balancing the recipe to suit your equipment is the best way to combat that. So if you know that your ice cream machine churns slow, you can reduce the sugar ever so slightly, and that makes it freeze quicker because it has a slightly higher freezing point. I also recommend that you look into using stabilizers. Guar gum, xanthan gum, tara gum, they're excellent. Even if you don't look at any of the others and you don't look at combining them, those 3 are really, really good for making your ice cream much, much better. The next question is, my ice cream is not sweet enough. This generally comes from people that do no sugar, zero sugar, low sugar recipes. The sugar substitutes generally are not as sweet as sugar, and that is the POD, P-O-D. That is what that term means. It's sweetness equivalency, essentially, compared to sucrose. So allulose is like 70% as sweet as table sugar. Xylitol is about 65 to 70% as sweet as table sugar. All these kind of things. When you start using them in recipes and your ice cream isn't sweet enough to taste, you can boost the sweetness using something like stevia, where you really only need like 3 drops or 4 drops, depending on the size of your recipe, to increase the sweetness or apparent sweetness, perceived sweetness, to a level that's in line with traditional table sugar. Next question is, my ice cream gets icy after a couple of days. This happens, again, for a few reasons, mainly one of 2. One is that you continually open your freezer, open and close, open and close. What you're doing is you're thawing your ice cream ever so slightly when you open it, because you're removing all that cold air, and then you are closing it and it's refreezing again. You create that freeze-thaw cycle, and every time you freeze and thaw, the ice crystals will increase in size. If you have a frost-free freezer, then that most of the time, every night, those things go up to a certain temperature to melt the ice, and then they freeze back down. That will have a huge impact on your ice cream. I hate frost-free fridge freezers for that reason. They destroy the texture of your ice cream and sorbet. And generally the other reason is stabilization. There's too much free water in there, and as an ice crystal starts to form, over time it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger because there's too much unprocessed water in a recipe. And that's why we need to look at stabilizing that water. Thicken it so that it doesn't get larger and larger in size and stays luscious, silky and smooth like the ice cream that we all enjoy. The next question is crumbly texture to my ice cream. This is usually caused by too high solids. It can also be caused by too high milk solids. You can get a crumbly texture in 2 different ways. One, when you go and scoop it, it doesn't scoop a nice, smooth, creamy ball. It breaks apart as you scoop it. That's generally too high solids. If your ice cream has a sandy kind of texture, that is generally caused by too high milk solids. So you need to balance your recipe and adjust it to suit the texture that you want. Nobody likes sandy textured ice cream, so don't give me a load of BS that that's how you like it. Next question is, my ice cream melts too fast. Melting ice cream. Ice cream melts. It's made of ice. Ice melts. If it's melting too fast, it's because there's too much free water in there. The moment it starts to melt, it will just exponentially get worse. Deal with the excess water and your ice cream won't melt as fast. Also look at using a stabilizer. that will increase the viscosity of any free water in your recipe. That will also slow the melt down as well. Next question is, my ice cream doesn't melt at all. That means you've used way too much stabilizer and you are holding in a very strange gelatinous mass all the air which can't escape. So reduce your stabilizer use and you will lose that problem. The final texture question or issue question is a gummy texture, and this is also caused by too much stabilizer. Xanthan gum is terrible for causing a gummy texture. I don't really like using xanthan gum a lot because you can't very successfully stabilize a decent amount of water without it going gummy. So I much prefer guar gum if I'm going to use a single processed stabilizer or a cold processed single use stabilizer. Tara gum is infinitely better than both of them. So I recommend you try a different stabilizer if that's the common problem that you're having. Gelato will use a lot more stabilizer than ice cream will because there's a lot more free water because there's lower fat. The next section is common ice cream terms, and the first one that everyone always asks me is, what is overrun? Overrun simply means the amount of air incorporated into an ice cream. Store-bought ice cream from the supermarket can have anywhere in excess of 100 to 150% overrun. There is a legal amount in the USA, and most people don't seem to abide by that, unfortunately. But the lighter a tub of ice cream is, the more air that's incorporated into it. So you're paying more, especially for keto, low sugar, no sugar recipes, all of those. Halo, it weighs nothing. I did a video on this a month or two ago, where I compared the weight of a tub of Ben & Jerry's to a tub of Halo, and it's 50% more overrun than a standard tub of Ben & Jerry's. So we're looking at 100% overrun, and that is how they get past calories as well. By increasing the air means they're reducing the calories per tub, makes everything sound much nicer. In reality, you're just paying more for air. What is the term SMP? SMP simply stands for skim milk powder. So that is 0 fat milk powder or 0.1 fat milk powder. You can get away with 1% milk powder, but don't use whole milk powder if you can help it. It has a really weird taste. What we're trying to do with skim milk powder is increase the milk solids without increasing the fat content. What is an ice cream stabilizer? An ice cream stabilizer is simply an additional ingredient that helps us increase the viscosity of our ice cream, stabilize any free water, and improves the texture and longevity of the ice cream that we make. What is the difference between ice cream and gelato? Ice cream and gelato, the term gelato means frozen and or ice cream depending on who you ask, but essentially gelato is lower fat, higher sugar ice cream, and ice cream, which is a generalized term for American ice cream, is higher fat, lower sugar. That's the difference. Gelato generally has a slightly less overrun than American ice cream, but as most home ice cream machines don't have any control over that, I wouldn't worry about it. The way to think about it is gelato has lower fat, usually between 5 and 8% fat, and American ice cream has somewhere between 11 and 18% fat. There are some excellent ice creams out there with over 18% fat, and there are some excellent ice creams in between that band from 8 to 11. So take it with a pinch of salt. Why do you age your ice cream base? Some ice creams have a lot of complex flavors that will come out and improve when you age, and that is literally just leaving the base in the refrigerator for 24 hours to allow those flavor elements to come out and bond together to create something really unique. Chocolate is a classic for it. Cocoa should be bloomed anyway, and that's why we cook our chocolate bases, but it also improves in flavor when we age them in the refrigerator. What is butterfat and or milk fat? That is simply a term used for the amount of fat that is contained in dairy. Milk, cream, it's all got different amounts of fat in it. So, your ultra skimmed milk is, basically 0.1 fat. This is the UK. Skim milk is around 1.8 to 2% fat. Whole milk is around 3% to 3.5% fat. Then you've got 3% in here in Canada, you've got your whole milk, which is about 3.25%. You've got your 2% milk, which is the equivalent of semi-skimmed. These are all just the amounts of fat in that dairy. Cream is the same. Double cream in the UK is 50% milk fat, butter fat, same term, same thing. Whipping cream here is about 33 to 36% milk fat, butter fat, depending on which one you buy. That is what that term is. It's the same. If you hear someone say butter fat, they mean milk fat. If you hear someone say milk fat, they mean butter fat. same thing. Finally, eggs versus stabilizers. The age-old question. What ice cream is better? Custard-based or non-custard-based? I don't know. I can't judge. I personally don't like using eggs that much in ice cream. I find it wasteful because you have to find something to do with the egg whites. And in the modern terms and days now, we have ways of doing the same thing that an egg yolk would do. An egg yolk increases the fat ever so slightly. I mean, it's a tiny amount too, but essentially you should consider egg yolks to be an emulsifier. So the lecithin within an egg yolk is what is beneficial to a recipe, a custard recipe. It helps to thicken and or bond water and fat molecules together to create a better emulsion. If you don't want to use eggs and you want to do the same thing, then you can just buy lecithin in powder or liquid form. I'm going to go into emulsifiers in more detail in up and coming videos, and I'm also going to show you how best to make custard-based ice creams. I have had some amazing custard-based ice creams. I've also had some amazing eggless ice creams. I've also had some amazing custard-based ice creams that don't use eggs. So you can achieve whatever you want to achieve, however you want to achieve it. Just do what's right for you. If you want to make a custard version of an ice cream that I put on my channel, then put some eggs in there. It won't make any difference to the fat content, really. All you're doing is using that to thicken the base and replace a stabilizer. Well, I hope that helped cover a few basic questions that you might have on your ice cream journey. We've got a lot of new subscribers to the channel, so I thought it might be beneficial to go through some of those basic questions that I take for granted and a lot of my long-term subscribers will take for granted too. These are terms that will come up time and time and time again. Once you realize that you have a perfect balanced set of ingredients available to use for your homemade ice cream, your life will be so much easier. You don't have to stress about worrying about ice crystals. You will never have that problem again. But if you are unsure about anything, feel free to chime in the comments. If I can't answer, some of my long-term subscribers will. We've got some excellent ice cream makers here following along. If you're new, welcome. You are about to embark on a journey that is going to improve your homemade ice cream and sorbet to a whole other level. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.